you have to have three things: focus, clarity, and resolve. All right? You have to know what your purpose is. You have to know how to achieve it, and you have to be determined to achieve it, okay? So what does this mean for the Middle East? What does it mean for Iran? Well, first thing is focus means unity. Meaning that you have to unite your population, which means basically crushing all dissent. We can't argue anymore. We have to unify for a purpose, okay? The second thing, clarity, is to censor people. Censorship. And we're already seeing that in Israel, where you're not allowed to film military strikes. Okay? If a drone comes and attacks Tel Aviv in Israel, you cannot film that and put on social media. Okay? The government will come and arrest you. Same thing in Dubai. You cannot show Dubai being attacked. Okay? So massive censorship going on. And resolve just means militarization, where the Middle East moves towards total war. Total war just means that every citizen now is recruited into the war effort. It just means that the entire economy is geared towards war. Okay? And one last point I'll make is this. What we need to understand about the escalation ladder is that as it moves up, we have to remember that this war is being fought multidimensionally. Okay? What does that mean? It means that the military is just one dimension, but there are four major dimensions. There are others, but let's focus on four major dimensions, okay? The first major dimension is narrative. Narrative is just basically world opinion. Second is political. Political just means the relationship of nations to each other. The relationship of the government to the people, okay? Political. The third dimension is economic. And the fourth is military. And what's really important to understand is that the military dimension is probably the least important. There are other dimensions that are much more important. Therefore, these four factors determine how the United States and Iran move up the escalation ladder. Okay? Because your purpose is to control the narrative and justify why you're doing what you're doing. Political means you still have to maintain good relations with other states, right? So as the United States is fighting this war against Iran, the United States is still talking to China. The United States is still talking to Russia, okay? So that discussion, that political discussion, determines the contours of this fight. Economic means that as this fight is still happening, nations are still trading with each other. And that factors into how the military is fought. Okay? Does that make sense? So I know this is very complicated, but you need to understand how complicated war is. It's not as simple as saying, you know what, let's nuke that guy. It doesn't work that way. Okay? There are a lot of constraints. There's a lot of factors, a lot of stakeholders involved to constrain the use of nukes. Okay? All right. So let's now discuss ground troops. All right. The first question we look at is, will ground troops be used? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes. They have to be used. And it has to do with how the military works, okay? Of how wars are fought. Basically, when you fight a war, you have to have a correct cost pyramid, okay? And the most simple cost pyramid, okay, is this. Infantry, soldiers, okay? All right? They're at the bottom. Why? Because they're the cheapest. What's above them? Armor. Okay? Artillery, tanks. They're more expensive to produce. You need more resources. You need more time. Then you have naval, right? Then you have air. Okay, does that make sense? This is the cost pyramid. And cost pyramid is this question of like, how much energy, how much time, how much resources do you need to produce a certain product, okay? It costs you very little to produce a soldier, but it costs you a lot to produce an airplane. And this is important because wars are usually wars of attrition, meaning that you have to put all your resources into win the war, okay? So this is just production capacity. And this is the most standard model that you have of a cost pyramid for a military war. Okay, does it make sense, guys? The problem is that the United States have an inverse pyramid. Okay? Meaning that air is what's dominant, then naval, then armor, then soldiers. You can't fight a war like this. I mean, the moment you choose to fight a war like this, you've lost the war. Because you either take out the country in like 2 days, or you scoot over, because you cannot replenish your forces. Now, I know this is hard to understand, but 1991, the Persian Gulf War, 2003, the Iraq War, these are not real wars, okay? Because the Americans were so dominant, and Iraq was so weak, that it was basically a video game, all right? It was just these pilots flying around, just bombing everything, okay? It's like guys in tanks just running over the Iraqi army. Those were just video games. But this Iran thing is a real war. And therefore, you cannot fight a war like this. If you want to win this war, the only thing you can do is return to a realistic cost pyramid. You don't have a choice in the matter, right? Because again, your cheapest product are soldiers, right? And your most expensive are airplanes. You cannot afford to use an airplane in order to save a life of a soldier. Eventually, this cost-benefit analysis will blow up on you, okay? Does that make sense, guys? All right, so if the United States wants to win this war, then it has no choice but to use ground troops, to use soldiers as the main force of its military. Any questions so far? All right. Okay. Now the question then is, will the United States use ground troops? I already said that if the United States is to win this war, it has no choice but to use ground troops. But will the United States use ground troops? And a lot is determined by the game theory strategies of the different players, okay? So let's look at the 4 major players in this war. You have US, you have Israel, you have Saudi Arabia, and you have Iran. Okay? All right? So, the United States and Iran, they're pretty easy to understand. What the United States wants to do is destroy Iran. Okay? Why? Because if we were to destroy Iran, the United States would have complete control over Middle East oil. And it would control global trade through the Strait of Hormuz. And therefore, the United States can maintain its empire, okay? So a really simple objective. Let's destroy Iran. We don't care how, we don't care why, let's just go do it, okay? Iran has another strategy, which is control Strait of Hormuz and destroy CENTCOM. CENTCOM is basically the American military in the Middle East, called Central Command, okay? So those are 2 major military objectives of Iran. And we can understand why. Because if CENTCOM is destroyed, Iran has complete control over the Middle East. Now, Dubai, now Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait have to pay taxes to Iran. Now Iran, the new kid, is now the bully of the Middle East, right? Now it's a hegemon. That is the political objective of this war. Okay? Israel is a bit more complicated. All right? For Israel, sorry. One other thing is humble Israel. That's the other thing, because even if you defeat the United States, you still have to deal with Israel, okay? And Israel is the great military power of the Middle East. So you want to humble them. You want to weaken them. You can't destroy Israel because Israel has nuclear weapons, right? You piss off Israel, those nukes start flying. You don't want that, right? So those are the three major political objectives for Iran. Control the Strait of Hormuz, destroy CENTCOM, and humble Israel, okay? If you are Israel, actually for you, the strategy is different. What you want to do is this. You want to destroy CENTCOM and destroy Iran. Okay? Those are your objectives. Why? Because if you destroy both the United States and you destroy Iran, then you are the sole hegemon in the Middle East, okay? Also destroy the GCC. Destroy Saudi Arabia as well. Why? Because once Saudi Arabia is destroyed, all its resources belong to you, okay? And this creates something called the Greater Israel Project, which is what we will discuss next class. But as you can see, that's really important, is that even though the United States and Israel are allies, their ultimate strategy is different. Their objectives are different. In fact, they're in conflict, okay? Then you have Saudi Arabia. What does Saudi Arabia want to do? Well, destroy Iran, because if you destroy Iran, you have complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. Then you can be a bully, okay? But you also want to destroy the US and you want to humble Israel. All right? Does that make sense? All right? So by understanding how each player perceives the game, we can now understand how they will go about their strategy, right? So the United States just wants to destroy Iran. But as you can see, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran all want to destroy the United States. And how do you do that? You do that by forcing the United States into a long ground war, right? Therefore, if you're Israel, you don't want to use nukes. Why? Because nukes would end the war too quickly. You want to drag this war out as long as possible to force the United States to send in ground troops. And then you're like, well, why doesn't the United States use nuclear weapons? And the answer is already told you, the escalation ladder. It needs to justify itself to the people, okay? When you do anything, all right, when you do anything, when you do anything, you have to worry about certain factors, okay? You have to worry about troop morale. Your soldiers have to believe that they are fighting for a good cause, okay? You have to worry about public opinion. You have to make sure that the world is on your side. You have to worry about politics, political will. You have to make sure the people are unified, and you have to worry about enemy morale. You don't want to piss off your enemy so much that they go into an extreme, they jump the escalation ladder to extreme beyond your control. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? So as you can see, war is extremely complicated. It's not just about weaponry. It's not just about resources. It's ultimately about controlling the narrative, controlling the political landscape. Okay? Marshaling the resources in a proper way that is strategically beneficial. All right? Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So, yeah, so we just answered two questions. Will the United States use ground troops? Yes, it will, because Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel will work together to force a ground invasion, even though the United States doesn't want to do so. But unfortunately, the United States doesn't have a clear, coherent strategy. It's passive. Therefore, it can be manipulated into sending a ground invasion, okay? And the second question is, will Israel and the United States use nuclear weapons? And the answer is no, because it's not in their best interest to use nuclear weapons. Okay? Israel wants the United States to lose this war. And so that means a long war that destroys the American political will to fight any more foreign wars. If America loses, Israel becomes the dominant power in the Middle East. Okay? And so the last question is the Al-Aqsa Mosque.